You're watching Sunrise Live on EN. Thanks so much for your company. Now, the National Empowerment Fund is hoping to encourage companies to contribute 3% of their yearly turnover to the newly established Enterprise Development Fund. This, they say, will help promote skills development and enterprise development, among others. To talk more on the fund, we're joined by the Chief Executive Officer of the National Empowerment Fund, Philisiwe Buthelezi. Philisiwe, thanks so much for your time. And I'm sure you're anxious to see the launch run smoothly and seamlessly tomorrow. But talk us through the conceptualization of the Economic Development Fund.
Thank you very much, Cindy, thank you very much for having me. I think it's a very exciting opportunity for the NEF. So basically what happens, we actually review the implementation of broad-based black economic empowerment in the South African economy. So when we're going through that research, we actually realized that a lot of the big corporates, private sector entities in South Africa were struggling to comply with the enterprise development aspect BEE scorecard. Just to refresh your memory, you'll remember that in terms of the codes of good practice, the private sector in South Africa and big corporates are supposed to do something about the ownership aspect of the scorecard, skills development and management and control, enterprise development and preferential procurement, especially from the black-owned entities. But if you look at the urgent need that has come from the government side of trying to create and develop an inclusive and a job-creating economy, we just thought the time is right for us to partner with the private sector to actually set up this enterprise development fund.
Okay, but this fund would then predispose the companies that are struggling with their BEE compliance, preferential procurement, etc., and equity. Would they now enjoy greater benefits in acquiring particularly the most lucrative, which is that of government?
Very much so, because you'll remember that in the enterprise development aspect of the codes of good practice, if the companies are able to contribute 3% of their net profits after tax towards the creation of black-owned enterprises, they can actually earn up to 15 points in their BEE scorecard. So we're actually making it easier for the private sector in South Africa, because we always believe that for some of the big entities, especially your multinationals, it becomes extremely difficult for them to go to the rural areas, because that's what we're going to be doing with some of the funds. Okay. We will be going to the rural communities to go and set up job creating opportunities for those rural people. And we believe the NEF has the infrastructure, we have the track record, because this is what we've been doing for the past 5 So the private sector has to tap into this expertise that we have actually created. We're making it easier for them.
All right, let's take a call. Sandile in Dobsonville in Soweto. Thanks so much for holding. And what's your view? Hi, Sandile.
I'm okay. My main objective is one. All these government institutions, they are all in town. They are not nearby us. If you can't allow the 20 rands to buy bread, you won't be able to access those offices. Please bring those offices closer to us.
Point taken. Thanks, Sandile. Access to your market, especially SMEs in peri-urban areas.
I think we've just set up offices all over the country now. Remember that in the past, we used to have offices only in Johannesburg. So we've just opened new offices in KZN, in the Eastern Cape, and the next one is going to be in Limpopo. But remember that you don't want to roll out this huge infrastructure if you don't have infrastructure internally that could then provide support to those satellite offices that we'll be setting up.
What's the current structure of the fund, especially if we take Sandile's example, where he says you barely have enough money to buy bread and you want to access the economic opportunities? What is the benefit to the likes of Sandile from this fund?
We're saying, you know, when you finance black-owned entities or any other entity for that matter, there are actually some risks that would be associated with the instruments that you put up in those investments or enterprises that you'll be supporting. So what the fund does is that, like for instance, you'll be using different types of instruments like your loan financing, it could be your equity, it could be your mezzanine financing. What this fund does is that it actually deals and caters for that risk, in that the money that's going to be coming from the private sector, because it's going to be on a 60-40 basis. So the NEF is going to be putting in 60%, and the private sector, you know, funds that will be sitting in this enterprise development fund will contribute 40% towards the total funding of any entity that we're going to be looking at. So it comes in as a soft loan.
Yeah.
You know,
almost
so
like
with,
a bailout or a startup.
yes. So the rates that are attached to it are actually very, very interesting.
Another caller, Lebogang and Vosloorus Ekurhuleni. What's your question?
Yes.
Hi.
Yes, I'm Lebogang from Vosloorus. I'm still studying mechanical engineering, but the problem is that most of us who are studying mechanical engineering, there's a streamline called design, of which there's not a lot of job demand, but we can create jobs for ourselves. The only problem is the capital. So I would like to know, where can we find these branches?
Yeah, thanks so much, Lebogang. And maybe even the criteria, because we know that there's a rigidity in terms of the compliance and regulations, etc., that people need to adhere to when they apply for funding or grants.
So basically, we've come up with a very innovative way of actually assessing the enterprises that the NEF invests in. So one of the key things that we actually look at would be, if you want our money, just tell us how many jobs are you going to be in a position to create, because that's very critical. We don't just want to throw our money away, even if you'll be creating 1 or 2 jobs. So it's actually 2 jobs, you know, that have been created as a result of our funding. So you have to actually state it upfront how many jobs. We also want to understand the women empowerment. So if it's like a big entity, let's say where the NEF would be investing about 100 million rands, we actually want to see whether you have set aside a small, even if it's 10% or 20% for women empowerment, the geographic spread. Where is this investment going to be located? Geographic. So if you actually factor all of those issues into our funding model, you may actually find that we end up providing that funding at prime minus 2%, whereas if it's just, you know, a normal transaction that is not going to create any additional jobs for our economy, then, you know, the pricing criteria then differs a little bit.
All right, Felicia, we're going to leave it there. Thanks so much. And indeed, we wish you success on the launch tomorrow of the Empowerment Fund. Thanks again for your time. We're speaking to the Chief Executive Officer of the National Empowerment Fund regarding the Enterprise Development Fund, which will be launched tomorrow. And for more information, please visit their website. That's nefco.co.za. That's nefco.co.za. We'll take a quick ad break. We'll see you there.
I absolutely do not get the same digestive problems that pregnant women tend to struggle with. I was introduced to All-Bran by my mom. All-Bran has been a really big part of my life. We've eaten Kellogg's for a long time. Well, you know, like, I'm not a morning person, not by any stretch of the imagination. I think once the baby's born, I might turn into just that one bowl in the morning. Really sets me up for most of the day.
An ex-tennis pro is about to get his shot.
I got involved with a woman. Very nice. Family's got nothing but money.
But with the ball in his court...
Are you having an affair?
What will he decide? Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, Scarlett Johansson. Match Point. Thursday at 8:30 on E!
Chick Flick Thursdays, presented to you by Dentyne.